Hi, I'm Alexander Bornstein. I'm a composer for film and television here in Los Angeles. Today we're going to talk about the Super 6 synthesizer from UDO Audio and some of the things you can do for film and television composition. One of the advantages of hardware synthesis is that it gives you an ability to be very tactile with how you design the sounds. And software has a lot of advantages, but the hardware technology is really caught up to software in terms of the flexibility that you get. And that's what's exciting about an instrument like the Super 6, is that it kind of walks this line between both worlds. And at the same time, I find myself reaching for a hardware synth to start my sound design process, typically because it's more immediate, and it gives me the chance to really interact with the sound before I go into the computer, because as a film and television composer, you're always ending up back in the computer. So this is a nice way to maybe sidestep that and just kind of stay interacting with only the sound for as long as possible. So that first patch I did, obviously both of them have a very atmospheric quality to it, which is really important when you're doing film and television music. You want to be musically interesting, but you have to also stay out of the way and be supporting of what's going on screen. And what's fun with the Super 6 is that you can implement a lot of cool performance things so that not only is the writing and the sound hopefully interesting, the performance of these patches is a lot of fun as well. And so the first patch used aftertouch to control various aspects of the synth, and because of the way the LFO is designed on the Super 6, you can very easily create these big morphing textures, which is a great way to create kind of interesting ideas and various compositional tricks to kind of keep things interesting, but at the same time you're not going to be getting in the way of the visuals. And so aftertouch is obviously very expressive. The Super 6 is exciting because it uses FPGA oscillators, and different from what you may have seen in a virtual analog synthesizer from 5-10 years ago. These are extremely accurate and in an ideal sense kind of give you the best of both worlds of analog oscillators and digital oscillators. And what's great is that the Super 6 has analog filters and an analog VCA, so you really are kind of caught in this interesting middle ground between both analog and digital synthesis. So now we can kind of take all the things we've been talking about and put them into practice by watching a short animated clip, and you can kind of hear these big morphing soundscapes. So the Super 6 is also really great at rhythmic sounds in addition to all of the sound design you can do with pads. And this patch I just created has a lot hopefully going for it, because what you can do is you can lock the arpeggiator in and use the mod matrix to have the envelope affect the resonance of the filter. So you can have the frequency sort of be affected by LFO1, its own envelope, and DDS2, but you can also use the mod matrix to get that little bit of extra modulation flexibility with envelope 1, so you get this nice kind of slapping sound with the resonance, and it's just this little extra thing to keep it interesting and hopefully give you some a little bit more of an aggressive sound if you need it. So, when I'm trying to do a more rhythmic kind of idea, synths like the Pro 2 are great when they have built-in sequencers or arpeggiators and things like that, and the idea is obviously it's much different from what we're doing with pads, which is much more, it's ethereal, it's spatial, it can be very beautiful, and, pulses can also function in that way and have a nice sort of, a pleasing and, beautiful quality as well, but you do want to have, delays and things like that that help kind of accentuate these sort of more transient pulse-based kind of sounds. And what's really helpful, with something like the Pro 3 is the paraphonic sequencing, where you can build harmonic sequences within the notes that are going on. And so you can build a whole cue around this kind of a thing. And it's useful when you're writing film and television music. Again, like I said earlier, about not getting in the way of what's going on, but trying to come up with interesting ideas, and changing the texture is a really great way to do that. And here in the sequence, what I tried to do was, as we move through, there's noise that gets gradually introduced. You can play around with the envelope shape as well. It'll get more aggressive and more, less attack means it's going to have more of a punchy sound, obviously. And but as I got towards the end of setting this patch up, I brought in the release was a little bit softer, and there's a little bit more attack. And what was once very, punchy and had a very clear transient, now is a little bit more ethereal and spacey, and we're kind of walking the middle ground between, both approaches to sound design. And that's really useful for film and television, where you can change things very subtly, again, without getting in the way, but also keeping it interesting. My advice, if someone's watching this video and they're thinking, how do I get started in this field, or where do I go, or what can I do to kind of keep sort of honing the craft of it all, I think it's important that you understand the technology that's out there. That's what drew me into hardware synthesizers, a long time ago, was that I saw more people were using them. They were gaining a lot of traction. Composers I liked listening to were using them. And so you really want to stay as far ahead of the curve as you can when it comes to technology. It's going to make your writing better. It's going to make your appeal if you're trying to work with other composers, if you want to try and become an assistant. Knowing all of that technology is a really important asset to have. And really just never stop writing, and really sort of see, just understand the language. And, hopefully, for experienced composers, everything I'm saying in this video is kind of old news, in terms of the way you approach the sound design, the way you approach, these musical ideas, in terms of how you can build these different moods. Hopefully, the clips kind of illustrated that too, that, these rhythmic ideas create a little bit more intensity and energy, but then you have these more spatial, ethereal ideas that are obviously creating a more, spacey, less, sort of intense environment. But really, it's just write as much as you can and, embrace the technology as much as possible. Something I hear from time to time is, people wonder, where does music theory play into all of this? Is it something that you really need to know when you're getting into sound design? And for me, I would say yes, which I don't know, and there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to that, because ultimately, it does play into everything that you're doing. When I did the sound patch here and I'm using the paraphonic sequencing on the Pro 3, it's important to know what notes I can do to create a paraphonic sequence that's going to make some sense harmonically. And, especially when it comes to film and television music, it's important because it's very based in a Western functional harmony kind of context, not always, but a lot of the time. And so it's important that you kind of understand those boundaries. It's not, this thing that I live and die by any means, but it is important to know those basics so that you can then figure out where you can push the boundaries. When I'm starting out with sound design, when I'm approaching, a project or a cue, and I sort of am getting into this world of electronic music and where am I going, I tend to, fall back on a lot of basics and start from there. If it's subtractive synthesis, it's kind of deciding, really basic questions probably a lot of people think about, is it a pad? Is it a pulse? Where am I going to take it? Does it need to be aggressive? Does it need to be loud or soft? And I kind of just, take it from there. My process is probably similar to a lot of other people's, and you just kind of work with it, and then you kind of let your instincts guide you into a certain place. I rely on all of my hardware synthesizers a lot for that, and that's kind of what they're really great for. Is it's a good place to start with an idea before you take it someplace else, whether you take it into your DAW, whether you keep it in your hardware rig and you're just kind of experimenting with ideas, but you can really sort of whatever is going to get the idea down into some kind of quantifiable way, so that I can give it back to the people that I'm working with for so they can review it. That's really the goal that I'm looking for, is what's going to get me to that place the fastest. Thanks for checking out this video. You can hear more of my work on my website, my Instagram, Twitter, all the usual suspects. Thanks so much for tuning in.